right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Sky's the Limit Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Doherty, and today we have a guest, Neal Bawa from Grocapitus. Neal is a technologist who's actually universally known in the real estate space as the mad scientist of multifamily. Besides being on one of the most in demand, or being one of the most in demand speakers in the commercial real estate space, Neal's a data guru. He's a process freak. He loves outsourcing a lot of different things, being a full stack developer. He's got a $500 million portfolio, and he's all about efficiency and optimization. So we're in for a real treat. Neal, welcome.
Thanks for having me on the show. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, it should be good. So one question I usually ask all of our guests is, how the hell did you get started in real estate investing?
Well, not typical. So I'm a technologist, right? Computer science degree. Data science is a passion of mine. So I'm amateur data scientist. And most people get started in real estate with a fix or flip or single family rental. I got into it in 2003 when our company decided that we were not going to rent anymore and we were going to build an office campus from scratch. 27,000 square feet, $6 million budget, no bank, no investors, just cash. And we were basically running a business with hundreds of employees during the day and then doing all of the work in the evening to build this up. So, we opened on July 4th, 2004, where, my son was 3 years old that day and he was actually running around and helping us move stuff. So it was a trial by fire. I learned a great deal. I made huge mistakes. I remember one of our mistakes cost us $800,000. And what I loved at the end of it was because I was a minor partner, a junior partner in that building, my income went up next year because our campus was custom designed and it basically took our business to the next level. But my taxable income went down because of this thing called depreciation. And back then, I didn't know, depreciation is legitimate. So I used to say real estate is the best authorized tax scam in America. Now, of course, I understand that depreciation makes, sense as part of the accounting law. And because I was stunned that here I am, big fat tax salary living in Taxifornia. And all of a sudden, I'm keeping more of my income. And that, starting 2004, got me hooked into real estate. And we ended up building or improving 5 more campuses.
Wow, that's a good start. And now, as you know, you could probably do things like cost segregation studies to further accelerate that depreciation. Because as we know, in commercial, depreciation is over, I believe, 39 years, 37 and a half years, something like that. And then residential is 27 years. So you have to wait all those. You take a little bit each, after you allocate the land value, you have to, you get the rest and it's divided by the number of years. So, but with cost segregation, you can accelerate all that appreciation very similar to how we can do with cars or SUVs that are over 6,000 pounds. You can have, the bonus depreciation on that. So to your point, so many different ways, especially if you can understand a little bit of the tax strategy. It's all legal. There's no loopholes, but it's just not knowing what and so, one question I had for you is Neal, you're known as the mad scientist of multifamily. Where did that nickname come from, and how does it actually does it help you run deals, or where did all that spiral from?
So I'll answer your question and then give you a longer answer as well. So the mad scientist moniker came in. I was presenting at a conference. I presented about half a dozen conferences a year. And I think this conference was in Provo, Utah in 2016. And I was, as I was walking up to present, the person that was there had seen a bunch of my stuff. And so he basically said, this guy's a mad scientist. He's a mad scientist of multifamily. And the audience had a really good, fun, positive reaction to that. So 3 weeks later, I was on his podcast, or what was his podcast back then, not really like this, but sort of a video sort of thing where we're chatting on Zoom. And he mentioned it again. And I was like, in a weird sort of way, what I do, the way I believe, is kind of a bit of a mad science to it. And so it stuck with me, and I basically started using it again, and it's been used ever since. So almost every introduction, I've been on 300 podcasts, has been the mad scientist of multifamily. And I think that resonates with me, not in the sense of being mad, but in the sense of using numbers in a different way. And, as we talk, you'll see that. And so I've enjoyed that process, and my journey has been so tied to math and so tied to numbers that just that amateur scientist feel is there in everything that I do.
Yeah, no, that's good. Now you're a data guru, and if you could give the listeners one piece of advice, what are the top three data points every investor should analyze before buying a property?
I think the biggest one that people in the industry have really learned to focus on is incoming supply. So there's this feeling that investors have that single family somehow is not part of the multifamily piece. And it's like, well, I'm a single family investor. I'm just going to buy one rental. It really doesn't matter what's happening in the industry, what's happening on the multifamily side. And when you say that, you are 100% lying to yourself. You're being lazy, you're not being irrational. So there's one rental industry in the United States, and that rental industry has four pieces to it, right? There's Class C multifamily, Class B multifamily, Class A multifamily, and single family rentals. So single family, Class A, Class B, Class C. It's one stack. And there's obviously, as you can imagine, the ones that are next to each other, single family, have the highest amount of connection with the Class A multifamily, the brand new, high end multifamily, and the least amount of connection with Class C. So if something bad happens on the Class C side, you probably are not going to notice it as much if you're a single family landlord. But if something happens on the Class A side, you're going to notice it almost immediately, because Class A rents typically are only a few $100, 200, 300, $400 a month below what single family rents are in that particular market. And so there's a competition there if something happens to those Class A rents. And so over the last 3 years, we have seen single family rents in many markets go down by 5%, and in some markets even go down by 10%. And these are the markets that have, in every single case, seen a huge amount of new apartment supply, where those apartment guys are basically offering 2 months off, essentially. That's like almost like a 20% discount on Class A. Now the gap between Class A rents on the lower side and single family rents on the higher side has increased so much. There are a lot of those people that were going to go into single family are like, I'm just going to go into a Class A property. It's beautiful. It's brand new. It's got a fancy pool. I'm going to do that. So I think that single family guys think that they don't need to, for some reason, look at incoming supply. It's nonsense. And also, you don't need to pay for anything. So I highly recommend that everyone that's interested in rentals, if you want to understand supply, if you think that what I'm saying makes sense to you, you should sign up for a free newsletter. This newsletter is from a company called Yardi Matrix, Yardi Matrix. And their newsletter comes once in a month, and it gives you a very, very good sense of what's happening with supply. They won't delve into one particular city in that newsletter, but they actually have other free newsletters that can give you more information about your city as well. Then the second thing that you can do is, when you're going into a market, even if you're looking for a single family property, you can always ask. Let's say the property is at the junction of Stephen and Equinox. Well, that's the closest junction to the property. Find the closest multifamily property that's more than 20 or 30 units to that junction, that area that your property is in, and then find a broker. If you ask around, your brokers will help you, if you're working with a broker in that market, to get a CoStar multifamily report. And then the very first page of that report has four numbers at the top, right? One number says absorption, one number says supply. If the supply number is higher than the absorption number, right, and they're continuing to project that, it's a one-page narrative, so you can just read it in plain English, then your rents are not going to go up. Because if the supply is very high, then single family rents often don't go down when multifamily rents go down, but they plateau. You have no pricing power to raise rents. And so the first thing that every investor needs to know is supply is king, whether you're doing single family or you're doing multifamily. So it's super, super important to understand that. The second piece of it is population growth. Do not go into markets. So the United States had very good population growth until about 2012, 2013. After that, our generic population growth slowed as young people basically decided not to have kids. But overall, our population growth was still very strong until about 2023, 2024 because of immigration. Obviously, the Biden administration just had our southern border open, and millions of people are coming in, and that was helping landlords, right? Because as millions of people come in, they have to live somewhere. And so the demand for rentals goes up. So at this point in time, though, even the Democrats are unlikely to sort of reopen the border if they come back into power. So on the one side, Americans are having way less kids, so our population growth is really, going down. And on the other side, immigration basically is now a third rail that no party will touch from the perspective of bringing in more people. And so as a landlord, you have a disadvantage that you didn't have 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 15 years ago. And that disadvantage is that you can't get demand moving up unless you specifically invest in markets that have significant population growth. By significant, I mean 1% population growth per year. That's a good number to use, 1%. And there's probably 50 markets in the US that would meet that benchmark. So it's not like it's hard. And the third one is job growth. So one of the key things that you'll often notice is markets that are growing at that 1% number, they'll probably have good job growth. But the key word is probably. You've got to make sure that the job growth of that market is as close to 2% as possible, because there may be a market that is growing, but the jobs are not growing there. It's just people like coming there, so they're coming there. So it might have 1% job growth. You'll never see less than 1% job growth if the population growth is 1%. That's not going to happen. But what you really want is 2% job growth. Just so you know, 2% or higher job growth leads to a significant increase in rent prices because there's competition. As people get jobs, that's when they tend to form their own household. When they form a household, 80-90% of the time they form a rental household before they move up to buying. And so your job is to basically get this data. And you might say, in the past, Neal, you used to have all these courses for finding this data. Yeah, but that was before we lived in the age of AI. Today, all you have to do is ask ChatGPT, I am interested in Idaho Falls. What is the 1 year and 5 year population growth in Idaho Falls? And what are the 1 year, 5 year projections? And I would also like to know the 1 year and 5 year job growth projections for the same, property. Give it to me in a table. It's going to give you an example. You can even say things like, well, I want to compare Idaho Falls to Northwest Arkansas, to St. George, Utah, to these 5 other cities that I've heard from Neal Bawa. I want to compare all of them and see how they do versus each other before I go out and invest there. So life's become a lot easier in terms of your ability to gather data. If you don't gather these 3 pieces of data, which basically is as simple as having a 1-minute conversation with AI, then shame on you, because you're not data driven. You just think you are.
Yeah, it's so good. And actually, I subscribe to CoStar, so I'm very familiar. I'm a agent, investor friendly agent, and for all of my clients and kind of my pool of investors, I send out a newsletter, and it has those supply, absorption, all those data points you mentioned for the different markets here in Connecticut, New Haven County, New London County, Hartford County,
You guys
Middlesex
have been having
County.
a good time. I mean, I didn't know
Yeah.
you were in Connecticut. I have to say this. I used to have a joke, which it no longer applies. I used to say, there's like 9 people in Connecticut, and one of them is Michael Bolton, right? But all of a sudden, we've seen a very significant spike in our data. Like Connecticut would never show up at the top of our list, but Hartford, Connecticut shows up over and over and over again in every single data. And because I don't track Connecticut, it's not one of my core states. I'm just curious as to what the heck is going on in Hartford, Connecticut. Why does it show up all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it just got voted. I think I don't know if it's specifically Hartford, Connecticut, or Hartford County, Connecticut. It's two,
I think it's more the county. I'd say probably
yeah,
county.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot. First of all, insurance capital of the world. So we have
Mhm.
some of the biggest players in the insurance space here as far as job growth and whatnot. They're expanding Hartford. I used to work downtown Hartford, ironically, in finance, and when I was there was tons. At the time, I didn't really. Maybe it was there, I just didn't realize it. But all of the luxury apartment buildings that you see now everywhere popping up, that was just starting off. But now it's blowing up, and then now you see people being pushed to the outskirts of Hartford. I actually live in West Hartford, Connecticut, and my house I bought in 2000, maybe about 5-6 years ago, for about 250 grand. It's probably tripled in price in less than 5 years, and that
Amazing.
I'm just comps based in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
So it's just you're seeing this, yeah, you're seeing this mass influx, and we also have very constrained and low supply here in Hartford
Right.
County.
That's one of the things. I mean, it's so hard
Yeah.
to build in Connecticut, right? I mean, all across the eastern seaboard, the one thing that protects the eastern seaboard, even though population growth is not very high at all in the eastern seaboard of the United States. None of those markets are really fast growing in terms of population growth. But one unusual thing that they have is it's so hard to build and build
Mm.
profitably that there's very little supply. I mean, look at Boston, right? One of the greatest markets in the world, low cap rates, so which is good for developers, right? The developers like low cap rates; it makes it easier for them to build. But still, nobody builds in Boston because it's almost impossible to build something profitably. It's so expensive to build. And Connecticut is sort of in that same bucket where it's very, very difficult to build. They're not very friendly at all.
Yeah. So, I have to ask, what do you think makes a market attractive in 2026 versus, let's say, 5 years ago?
So, we talked about Hartford, obviously, because of the extreme supply issue. What makes a market attractive today is, can you find a market that has low property taxes, low insurance, low cost of construction if you're building, uh, high population growth, and high job growth. So if you're not building, so it's five if you're building and four if you're not building, right? So the only difference is construction cost. If you're building, you want low cost of construction in there as well. If you're not building, then you leave that one alone, and you've got low insurance, low property taxes, high population growth, high job growth. Four different metrics, and they all have to work in 2026 for numbers to work. So this basically means you're knocking out all of Texas. And I'm not saying you can't make money in Texas. I'm saying it's easier to make money elsewhere. Why? Because property taxes and insurance are both very high in Texas, right? So for example, let me tell you, I'm building a property right now in Idaho Falls. The tax rate is 0.42%. The tax rate in San Antonio, where I built a property a long time ago, 4 or 5 years ago, is 3%, which essentially means that my taxes are 7 times higher for each unit, for each square foot, right, than they are in Idaho Falls. That's why I'm not building anything in Texas. I want to build. I mean, Texas has great growth. It's just the math doesn't work, right? It's preventing me from building it. So I'm just sitting there and watching it. So the same thing applies for insurance. If I have a brand new a townhome in Idaho Falls, my cost is about 800. Nationwide, it's probably about 1,400. In Texas, it's probably about 1,800, right? So same townhome, same rent, but now I'm paying a lot more. So there's this
Mm.
obsession that people have with just looking at rents. And it's a bad obsession to have because until 2018, 2019, property taxes in the US overall were pretty decent and insurance was pretty decent. But in the last 6 years, if you look at what has increased really rapidly, it's not rents, it's property taxes and insurance. So
Mm.
on the cost side, you've seen a huge inflation, a massive, massive inflation. But on the rent side, you haven't really seen the rents go up. 2021 and 2022 were big rent years. But if you look at 23, 24, and 25, they haven't been high rent years. 25 was maybe 1% for single families, 0% for multifamily. So we're not seeing that rent inflation, but we are seeing cost inflation. So if going forward, if you're picking a city where your insurance and property taxes are high, or even one of those two is high, you're basically tying your hands behind your back. Why would you want to do that in the age of AI? Wouldn't AI be able to tell you what are some of the cities with some of the lowest property tax insurance combos in the US that also have, population growth and job growth? Of course it would.
Yeah. Wow. So you like Idaho Falls. That's where you're currently building now?
I like Idaho and Utah. So I'll basically say, Idaho Falls is my favorite city to invest in. It may not be yours. But what I've found is if you look at Idaho and Utah, you'll find that these are states that tend to be in the top 10% or top 20% in terms of job growth, population growth. So that's really great. Idaho Falls in particular is in the top 1%, and I'll explain why. It has to do with one word, nuclear. But in general, I like to invest in states that are low property tax, low insurance, and are in the top 10% in the US in terms of population and job growth. And both Utah and Idaho match that, right? There's another reason that I like Utah and Idaho, and this is going to sound like a joke, and it is not. Mormons have a lot of kids. An average Mormon has twice as many kids as the average American. I would
Mm.
love to invest in markets that have a large number of children because that means larger units and more rent. Again, this is not meant to be funny. And just so you know, Idaho, southeastern Idaho is just as Mormon as Utah, right? So because a lot of Mormonism was from Idaho Falls originally, not so much Boise, which is on the other side of Utah, other side of Idaho. So when you have Mormons are the greatest single fastest growing population in America by a very, very long shot. They used to have eight
Really?
kids, seven kids, six kids. Now they have four or five, which is still awesome, right? Or three, right? But very few Mormon families have two kids. It's just not a Mormon thing to do, right?
Mm,
Contraception is not a Mormon thing to do. So as a data scientist, and you're chuckling, is like you're like, haha, they have lots of kids. Yeah, but isn't that great? If you want to make a 5 year, 10 year investment, don't you want to invest it in an area where people are having four or five or six kids?
yeah, and you typically aren't seeing them leave because that's where their community is.
So they're very community based, right? So
Right.
both Idaho and Utah are amongst they don't ever show up in that annual January 15th report that U-Haul puts out that shows like how many people are leaving each state. You
Hmm.
never see Idaho or Utah in the top or even in the middle. They're always at the bottom because Mormons are tied to their community, so they tend not to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really good. So, if you could give one piece of advice to investors trying to build wealth in real estate, what would you say? Where would you start?
Um, the easy money is gone, right? The low hanging fruit is gone. Let's be
Mhm.
honest. The low hanging fruit is gone. I think you should now be looking at government grants and government loans, subsidized loans, and trying to apply them to your projects in whatever way that you can. You don't have to build to do this, even though the best loans are definitely available to builders. But there are lots and lots of loans available. There's more available than you think. There's a lot of people that say, well, nothing is available. Well, that's because nobody is researching this stuff, right? And it's painful to go through the process and do the paperwork. It takes time and effort and money and systems and processes, right? But once you have those done and you can take advantage of them, you can take advantage of them over and over again.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you don't have to go out and use low income housing or do anything like that. Do you know that there are some cities that give you grants to just improve an existing building?
Especially in like opportunity zones.
In So in OZs, they're easiest to get, but even
Yeah.
outside of an opportunity zone, you can get money to improve buildings, existing buildings. And people are always surprised when I say that. And
Hmm.
my question is, how many phone calls have you made in your career to cities and asked them if they have these loans? The answer, if you're truthful, is zero, right?
Zero.
So how would you
Zero.
know?
Yep.
I have a full-time employee. His name's Toby. He's from the Philippines. His job is to make those phone calls.
Super smart. Super smart. Wow. Yeah. I actually have a VA in the Philippines too, and I never asked you to do that. It's a good one. That's really good. Wow. So as we wrap up here, one question I typically ask all of our guests is, what does your day to day look like? Walk me through your morning from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. From if you have rituals in the morning, or you do stuff with family, and then getting into work, and then wrapping up the day. How's that look for you?
Get up at 5, be out of the door
Okay.
at 5:15, come back from my walk at 5:45, start my meditation at 6, finish meditation at 6:30, spend the next hour and a half either learning or YouTube. Some of it is casual stuff. Sports stuff like that. At
Hmm.
7, check my Slack and my email and clean everything up, which makes me feel like I'm starting with a clean day. So I'll spend 20 minutes
Mm.
cleaning up Slack, cleaning up my email. At 7:30, I have my meeting with Michelle, one of my two assistants. She'll call in. We'll have a 15-minute meeting. We'll go over the calendar. We'll go over previous day. I give to her my weight. I give her my whether I exercised the previous day. Most of my exercise is also in the morning. So some days the mornings are different because of exercise, or maybe there's exercise in the evening. I'm a Pilates fan. And then on Thursday mornings, I have a 2 hour meeting with my business coach. So that day is different. But otherwise, that's pretty much what the morning looks like. And then my day is mostly driven by my calendar, right? So I have daily, weekly, and monthly meetings on my calendar, which take up about 50% of my calendar. I have office hours every day where people just from my company just come in, ask questions, and leave. There's no appointments. You just walk into a Zoom room. Um, and then I finished right around 3. I don't believe in work. In the age of AI and the age of virtual assistants, each person can do 10 people worth of work. So if you're working, more than 7 or 8 hours, it's because you want to, and more power to you, but you don't have to. There's no
Mm,
longer a requirement for somebody to work 10 to 12 hours a day if you know how to use virtual assistants and you know how to use AI.
mm. I like that. That's really good. Well, Neil, thank you again. You've been an amazing guest. Learned a lot myself. I'm sure the listeners have learned a lot. And for everyone listening, if you liked what you heard today, there's always more episodes. We put one out almost every week. Be sure to like and subscribe. And Neil, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Fantastic. For those of you that would like access to our data, we give it away for free. It's at multifamilyu.com/club. So we have about 10,000 people that use this data. It's completely free. There's no subscription, no upsell, no educational, platform that you can buy. Check out multifamilyu.com/club.
And we'll be sure to link everything in the show notes as well. Thank you for watching Sky's the Limit. We're always releasing new real estate content, so if there's something you want to hear, be sure to leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.